So we're gonna go over the fundamentals today. An introduction, that's why I had to read the introduction. We're gonna talk a little bit about and introduce this last class. Before we go in, do you have any questions about anything at all? That you're like, I wish I would have asked last class, or something new came up, I'm kind of interested. Last question, yes.
Is the book edition number matter a lot of what are the names missing?
That's a good question. I don't know. The only thing that I would expect is and I don't know how we would check that unless we actually got another edition, but the discussion question might not match up, yeah.
Yeah, so I have the fourth edition, for it, what like one of the parties.
Okay,
I don't know, like looking for, but that's what I.
Red skiing on Saturday. Anybody go up skiing this week? Did you see me? No? You'll see me when you see me. I'm not that I'm skiing in this, that would be funny. Saturday was awful, I should not have went up. When'd you go up?
Right,
Saturday was awful, wasn't it? It was too crowded, the snow was terrible. I just hit a bump, I just kind of went like this, and you ever do that with you ever crack or pinch like a muscle in your rib area? Anybody done that? Any sports players? You've done it. That takes a while to heal, doesn't it? And you can't cough or sneeze. And that basically summarizes the introduction to ethics. Going back to your question, if you picked a different edition and that does come up, either. And I'm trying to figure out how you would know that you may have to, before you start, what I would do before you start the assignment, I'd find a fellow student that has the most recent edition and just look. If one of the questions doesn't, just take a photograph of the questions. That's what you're gonna have to do if you have a different edition. Okay, any other questions? Great questions, guys. All right, so. We kind of gave a general discussion about ethics. And why we're taking any class or discipline is we're attempting to know something about the world, correct? And there's a lot of different things to know. Now, what we do then is we divide up the kind of disciplines or sciences, classes, according to the subject matter, correct? The subject matter, the things that we want to know. So then what we get is a body of knowledge or discipline dedicated at knowing specific subjects about the world in which we live. There's a discipline dedicated knowing about number and magnitudes. And all the things related with that, that's called mathematics. There's disciplines that are, well, I want to know about the human body, what's that called? Anatomy. I wanna know about. The physical laws of motion in the universe, that's typically what would be what? I would go study. Physics. Give me another one, I wanna learn. About, I know about this about the world, give me an example and then we'll name the discipline or science.
Plants and animals.
Plants and animals. Biology and zoology. What if I want to study like human being writ large, anthropology? What if I mix animals and humans in the relation? We have a. You sign up for Carol, it's called anthro. Zoology, okay. Okay, I'm learning, or at least I'm trying to figure out different facts about the world. We have economics. We have law. Medicine. Culinary disciplines and sciences and arts. Fine arts. Music. Now. Those are all very different. The latter ones that I mentioned in the former. Because those are what we would have called applied disciplines. So we're learning not only about things about the world, but we're doing something with it. A mathematician. As simply a mathematician is not really concerned about doing anything with learning about knowledge and numbers. Whereas an engineer is. An engineer learns math so that he can apply it. Learning how to build sound structures and reason through that. Medicine learns biology, chemistry, and anatomy so they can apply it. Law, application. Do you see that those are different? Ethics is the same thing, it's an applied. It's an applied discipline of science. And we talked about and distinguished in last class why ethics might actually be really important. And why getting the right answer has why that's important, and the wrong answer perhaps disastrous consequences. Because that's application, right? I contrasted the mathematics. I don't really have to worry too much if somebody gets the wrong math answer, correct? What did I say? It's not the power grid's gonna go down and stock markets are gonna collapse and. The crops are destroyed, nobody can eat. Like. You're free to be wrong and there's probably not gonna be much consequences to you. Ethics is a little bit different. Medicine's a little bit different. Right? What happens when you're a surgeon and you get the wrong answer? Oops. Engineering, when you get the wrong answer. The structural disasters, bad engineering. Give me another example. Things that go wrong for 500. Yes, meteorology. I guess economics too. Right, it's the wrong economic model of how you apply it. Can you give me one more? Pilot, yeah, error. So funny, I just saw on Twitter. God, Twitter is just endless fun, enjoyment. Did you see the one where? I could be found anywhere. The airline was like, the passengers noticed there was a bunch of missing bolts. On the lien, easiest one, stop me if you've heard this one. And they pointed out and they were like, oh yeah, don't worry about those, they weren't important bolts. Get more nervous about flying. I used to not be. Because when you get things wrong in that situation, it's disastrous. And all the other ones, so perhaps there's something to be said about. Yes, there's an extra additional level of. Importance to practical disciplines, because getting the wrong answers. Can have disastrous consequences. So likewise. With ethics. And we're gonna talk about different kind of branches, subdivisions. I'm clicking on that. Oops. Three different areas or subdivisions of ethics. Value theory. You want a good life? Maybe I'd say when a child, I want to grow up and have a bad life. So what makes a good life? What is the good life? What does it mean to be a good person? To live a good life? That would be value through normative ethics. What are our moral duties? What's a duty? So first on the first one. Again, what is a good life? What does it mean to be a good person? What's worth pursuing for its own sake? What does that mean, its own sake? All right, you got two phrases here. I want the purple. Not just because that's the Carroll College color, but pen reads better. Something for its own sake versus for another thing. So there's some things that you want and desire because just like we did last class, why do you want a good job? Why do you want the A? For the next thing. And for this, why do I desire this? For the next thing here. That's what we mean for the sake of another thing. Then there's things that are desirable for their own sake. I'm not using this to get something else. I fulfillment in actually obtaining that. Now, this is a really important distinction in philosophy and in ethics, because we can get those things confused and we have problems. Let's pick out things that we would say, the only reason why I want that, the only reason why it has value to me, and no, this isn't under the category of value theory. There's nothing intrinsically valuable about that. It's for use, that I can use it to get something else. When you think of anything that I like this, I like to get this because it helps me with something else. Yes. Money. Money. Good, yes. Education. Anything else? So. Pull out your dollar bills. Is there any intrinsic value to that piece of paper? No. We use it to get something else. Now, if I mix these two categories, it's weird and I have a problem. If you have somebody that just collects money and says, I will never use it, find no use in it at all, just like collecting it, don't we think that's tragic? Like, give it to me, I'll use it. Cause that belongs in the use category, it's desirable for the sake of something else. And there's other things. That although you might be able to use it. Their value is intrinsic, meaning the reason why I desire it. Is irrespective of whether it can be used or not. Can we think of anything that, yes, I desire. I like. Blah, blah, blah. Whether I use it or not, whether there's use to it or not, I know I might use it, but that's not why I want it. It's not why I like it. It's desirable for its own sake. You just said money isn't one of them, so let's pick something that is. What's something be like? Yes, I think it's worth getting or having in my life, whether I use it or not.
Art.
Art, excellent. As long as you're not an art dealer, I always use that example. So. Beauty. Is not practical. Now, you could use art that's beautiful and sell it. But somebody who appreciates art or beauty finds that that's desirable for its own sake, yes.
I was gonna say like a hobby.
A hobby. Maybe a hobby. Something else. Parents? Use category? And desirable in their own sake. Why do I love my parents? Because they give me stuff, that's the only reason. It's the only reason they have value. So it'd be terrible, right? You'd be like, there's something messed up about that answer. Why do I love my wife? Because I can use it. It's a tool, right? That's the only, that would be terrible, right? By the way, that's kind of what it means when we objectify somebody, we treat them, I typically use objects. Right, but persons. I'm supposed to love for their own sake. Right, I don't find them value just because of like, well, it's just like an object and tool that I will use. For my world domination. To get whatever I want. It didn't cost, that's messed up. So that's why these categories are important. Perhaps education is one for its own sake, even though it can be used. And we brought up this before. Let's relate to ethics. You just only see the value in education to get something else. You might not be ultimately fulfilled in life, so you gotta know, you gotta go. So yes, there is a use to education. But typically, beauty, truth, goodness, these were called transcendentals. They're all desirable in their own right. Well, notice this, the good life. What makes a life go well? I want to be a good person. Maybe that answers the question. Here they found a textbook. Is there anything worth pursuing its own sake? Maybe a good life is, maybe being a good person. I won't know unless I can actually make these kinds of distinctions and then analyze it. And what subject of ethics does that? Value theory. Everybody follow me on that? Once I have that sorted out, then I'd be like, well, how do I improve my lot? Maybe I'm not satisfied with where I'm at in life. What did I say last class? I thought that it was a good rule of thumb to say I should become more than what I'm in currently in life. That's kind of answering the question, how do I improve my lot? How do I become better? Value theory. Now, if I ask questions about what are our moral duties, What is a duty?
Obligation.
An obligation. This word here, normative, implies oughts and shoulds. Now, this is really important. Grammatically and philosophically, oughts and shoulds are not same as, I know this sounds weird, is's. Grammatically, ought is not the same as is. What's the difference? Plug it into a sentence and you'll see. Just give me a sentence. It's taking me this long to answer that question. This class ain't gonna happen. The tree is plain. John is ill. These are what we call descriptions to describe the way the world is, whether the world of mathematics, physical world, the state of people. That's not what duties are. It's not the same as oughts. Let's give it an ought or should. Jane ought to blank. Do what?
Good homework.
Yes. Is she? Well, it's not describing it. It's saying she ought to. Bill should blank.
Clean his room.
I was gonna say shut up, but clean rooms. What category do I put? If these are descriptions, these are prescriptions. Prescribe, like you ought to think about medicine. You ought to take your. Not Adderall, no, that was mine. You ought to take your ibuprofen when you bust your rib. It's good. It's a duty, right? Okay, ethics is talking about this. Laws are in the normative sphere. So all of this is normative, normativity. Ethics, law, morality. And they're in a different category. They're not simply describing the way the world is or what people believe. I don't actually even say Philosophy itself is normative. What you ought to believe, I mean, there's an aspect of philosophy. So. Let's put beliefs. Knowledge, stuff like that, ethics, law, morality, they're not simply describing, because I can describe what people believe. This guy out there believes 2 + 3 = 8. Should he? No, he ought not to believe that. Knowledge implies. So I give a description. And saying he has a duty in some sense. To believe what's true and avoid what's false. Actions. You ought to do what's good. And avoid what's what? What's bad. Bad. What's bad? Law. I'll take a simple one. Traffic law, when the light turns red, you should. It's not describing a state of affairs. It's giving a normative prescription that's binding on you. You ought to do this. And universally the case, right? It's not just like, well, for people wearing green shirts, no. But if you're wearing another color, you have to stop. It's like, no, it's universally the case. So again, duties have a prescriptive quality to it. You ought to and you should do these things. It's your duty. Any questions about that? Do you see how we're sussing out? Fleshing out these different categories and why that's important. And that's part of the importance of philosophy is clarification. How many times do we get things wrong because people aren't clear with what they're saying? That's why philosophy, which ethics is a discipline of, what do you mean by that? Be clear, we're confused. So we're getting clarification. One of those is to clarify both the meaning, putting things in the right categories. Because if you don't put something in the right category, it breaks and there's problems. Character traits. People have character traits. Do you think there's a way? Are there desirable character traits insofar as you prescribe? These are good and these are bad. Name a bad one. Sociopath, that's right. Not pointing that you are one, but it was in your thought, in your head going, oh, but a sociopath's not something that you should have as a personality trait. Can you name another one? Not a great personality trait. Wouldn't recommend or prescribe that people acquire and become like that. Narcissist. Narcissist. In fact, we develop a whole discipline of mental health. Cognitive distortions. Has anybody heard of that? Bad ways of thinking about stuff. Personality disorders. Order and disorder, right? Order is like the way it should be, Disorder, that's not the way it ought to be. So we're in the normative sphere. So even medicine and mental, especially mental health, has to apply to normative ethics. Well, what's a good way to, what's a healthy mindset? What's a bad mindset? Virtues and vices. These things are considered to be good things to acquire. Virtues, courage, temperance, patience. And you probably should avoid what? Self-centeredness, miserliness, these different things. Shoulds. So that falls into normative. ethics if we talk about that as well. Questions about, do the ends always justify the means? You ever heard that? This is an example here. Money is a means for some end. A means to get to something else. That's why we don't get these categories correct. I shouldn't use people is only a means to get something else. But sometimes the ends do justify the means. We'll have to go through a lot of those examples. That whole question falls into normative ethics. Are there certain types of things, and especially in medicine, this is where this becomes relevant. Are there like no-goes? Like there's some hard decisions in medicine, right? The doctors can't figure out, so they have to hire bioethicists. People who have spent enough time that they become credentialed in solving ethical dilemmas. So the doctors can appeal to, we do this all the time, right? I have to hire people and expertise. One example just came up. I have in one of the companies I run, Patricia Faith, I have a marketing manager and executive. Why? It's not my expertise, it's not my jam. I have somebody that's credentialed, spent all the time and actually holds a position in a firm that knows about all this stuff. I'm not an accountant. Sometimes you might have to hire an accountant, right? I have to outsource. Doctors have to do that too, because medicine's going to imply and require sometimes making ethical decisions, in which questions like this are like, this is bad. Triage, anybody heard of triage? Triage is a terrible thing. You actually have to prioritize somebody in a number of injured, like who am I gonna deal with first? All y'all is injured and you're in my hospital right now. But I can't deal with you all at the same time, so what do I have to do? I have to create a number system in terms of priority. What's the most urgent? That's hard. I have to make some hard decisions, it's not good, but there's no other option. In that case, maybe, yes, the end to heal justifies the means of me doing that. Bad things are gonna have to, I can't see her, I'm sorry, I gotta. She's missing an arm and leg. You've got a sore throat. I'd love to, it's bad that I'm not treating, but what? The ends justify the means here. Maybe there's certain things in medicine where it's like, this isn't always a no-go. I couldn't do this. As considered, what does that fall under? Normative ethics. We'll talk about that. Any questions about that? And it may be disputed. Obviously, yesterday was the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, right? Here's a bioethical question that has to be dealt with. Is it correct? Is it ever correct? Or is it a no-go? And then you think about the extreme examples that you're gonna have to deal with, like, well, what if the mother's life is in danger, and like these sort of things. And then you work inwards. What does that fall under? Normative ethics. So you see that they're related even to both political and medicine and bioethical questions there. And you're gonna have varying you're gonna have people, some people say, yeah, a woman should be able to at any point, then. There's others, they're gonna be like, no. Can't. Maybe never, maybe only in these cases or something like that. What I'm trying to say is that. Don't be discouraged that people have different opinions, right? And we're gonna talk about this in terms of the status of ethic and knowledge. What does that mean? There's no right answer? How would I get it? Just because people are disagreeing on it. That moves us into metaethics. If I make a moral claim, it's always wrong to eat bacon on Wednesday. You might be like, well, what's the status of, is that a duty for me? Is that, what is that, subjective? Like, why? Would you say that? Well, that was an ethical claim. I picked a silly one, but there's gonna be ones that are more serious. Well, what's the status of that? Am I bound to that, whether I agree with it or not? I don't like stopping at red lights. No cop, no. Stop, yeah. Woo! Always the missing, like, unobserved cop. Am I still bound by it? Is it still my duty? Whether I agree with it or not? Well, that's questions about the status of law, duties, and ethics. That is metaethics. Can ethical theories, moral principles, and specific moral verdicts be true? That's another question about status. We'll get into later. There's actually some ethical people that like ethical theories that think like there's no even truth value to any ethical claims. So it's called ethical nihilism. Well, that's an interesting way to go. How would you possibly justify that? We'll see. I don't agree with it, but like there is a group out there, and there they are, right there. Get them. No, I'm kidding. I'm just giving you a purview of the landscape that we're going to cover. What makes them true? A moral claim true. Because I say so, that's the right answer. We have to figure that out. Is it a vote? Which is, well, we'll just vote it on 2 + 3 = 5, and that's how we got. Is ethics the same way? Different? That's not true about my friend. But what about ethics? Like, those are questions that we're going to explore. How do we know that? Could you become wise in terms of ethics? Those questions fall under metaethics. You have good reasons for moral duties. Now, all of this relates to why this is philosophy. Why we're going to look at arguments. I think in the textbook it even had an illustration and discussion about what an argument actually is. Again, I gave you a little history of myself. One of my frustrations growing up when I was in high school, 16, 17, I began to question stuff. My religion, the rules, what was happening? I was becoming philosophical. Now, what's underlying going on in my character, when I do introspection and analysis on that, is that I found that I believed a bunch of things to be true and not true. And I wanted to know what the reasons were and whether they were good reasons. So what do? You go to your teachers, you go to your parents. And if they said, because I said so, does that sound like a good reason? And so it frustrated me. I'm like, well, that person's dumb and marked off the list for people I'm gonna ever listen to again. What I was looking for is good reasons to believe things. And I think we would want the same thing If we hold ethical beliefs with any of these things, why does it fall under the branch of philosophy? Is because we want to have good reasons for believing that those are true, not true, that they're duties. Good reasons for describing what a good life would be, virtues, etc. That's why it falls under the category of philosophy. Now, we already talked about truth. Now, because this is the status of, are there any ethical truths? What do you mean by truth? Making statements and claims, moral claims. What are the status of that? I'm going to give some clear-cut examples of things that you agree with. Because Aristotle always says, if something isn't clear, you don't go to something that's even more obscure to explain that. When you say, for example, you go to something clear, right? It's more clear. To illustrate and illumine something that's obscure. That's why if a kid doesn't understand what an arithmetic problem, what do? You don't go, wow. Let me explain derivatives to you. And how to compute a limit, right? Because ultimately it ties into it. It's just like, no, that's even worse, right? You're going the wrong direction, go clear. Be like, well, Johnny and Jane, you see these 3 apples here and these 2 apples, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2 plus 3 equals 5. And they're like, oh, yeah. You went to something that's clear. We do that in philosophy. What's clear? Mathematics is usually pretty clear. So I know what it is to make mathematical claims and to have truth claims in mathematics. 2 plus 3 equals 5 is 5. 2 plus 3 is. Now I'm gonna ask true or false. I know what the truth value of that is. Now, what's the status of that truth? I have 2 categories that I can put that in. It's either objective. That statement is either objective. What's that? Or subjective, it's relative. Well, let's go with an example to figure this out. What are things that we think are subjective? That's mere opinion or perspective. It's not true for all people at all times. It's your opinion. Give me a very clear-cut example. Something with food or something, I don't know.
You say beauty.
Beauty? That one's a little bit, let's go ahead and be clear because that's actually debated, right? But let's go to like one that's just like, name a food and how it tastes to you. Notice to you. Cottage cheese.
Creamy peanut butter is the best.
Good. Taste the best, it would be best. To who?
Myself.
Yeah, so. Subject, you. Versus object. Right? Independent of you. So obviously taste of peanut butter is something that applies to you. Color or something like that. My favorite color, right? I'm going to the most clear example because like I said, beauty is debated. I want to get into that conversation. But we all know the phrase beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know, is it subjective, is it objective? But we definitely think that food, color preference, taste, smells. Those are definitely things that like clearly subjective. Why they're dependent on me? Kind of makes sense. How can something taste a certain way or smell a certain way if there's no tasters or smellers? No subjects. This goes into the subject or objective category. Because let's say I disagree with. I don't like purple. I don't think purple is the best looking color for the bathroom, I say to my wife. Purple would be a weird color for a bathroom, wouldn't it? And she says, well, that's just your opinion. But objective things, they would be true regardless of what you think about it, right? So what if I'm just like, I don't like the fact that 2 + 3 is 5? Does it care about my feelings? Well, I don't believe it. I think it's 8. Does it care about what I believe? Is it going to change? You can pick out other statements too. There's a tree outside. There's a sun. Like, I don't think so. It's like, it doesn't matter what you think. Why? Because objective facts are independent of you and your feelings and your desires. Okay, are we getting clear on the categories? This becomes relevant both in terms of, are there any facts that are objective? Or as we often hear today, everybody believes something different. So there is nothing objective. These are two mutually exclusive categories. So are all facts subjective, or are there some that are objective? Can't have both. Well, we hear this a lot. Well, hey, people believe different stuff about different stuff. Who are we to say? Notice we're asking philosophical questions. And then that's the first thing we got to figure out. Are there any objective facts? Or is it all relative and subjective? Does anybody have an idea of how we'd figure this out, just in general? And then we'll move to more specific examples about ethics. Is there any way to figure this out? Are all facts simply a matter of opinion in the way somebody sees it? Or are facts independent? Some facts independent of our desires and beliefs and what we think. Does anybody, show of hands, does anybody think we could figure that out? No takers? Does anybody want to know how to figure that out? Okay. If all facts, let's assume this is true. There are no objective facts. Everything's just the way everybody sees it, because everybody believes something different. That statement, if everything's relative and subjective, then there are no objective facts. Correct? That's what subjective is relative. There are no objective. Really easy. Ask, is that objectively true or false? That statement. You have one or two options. Let's say false. It's false. Okay, that is false. Well, that's not true, then this is true. Okay, let's assume the other option. It's objectively true. Or it's true. Well, if it's objectively true, then it's not relative, is it? You just admitted. So this is what we call self-refuting. It's impossible to maintain that position. Let me give you another example. There are no such thing as words. Really? I mean, the thing that you use to show that didn't exist, words. I used words to show words don't exist. What did you say to somebody like that? One of two things, you're either on drugs. You can be go to the mental health. Or you're being a stinker and ornery or false. I don't. 4 things that you can tell somebody when they say. There is no truth, true or false. You see, it's self-refuting. So that means facts by nature are objective. That means, of course, some things are going to be subjective, like we pointed out the clear examples. But this position that everything is subjective is untenable. Just as untenable as saying, I'm using words to tell you words don't exist. It's nonsensical, it's just self-refuting. So facts in general are objective. And I think you gave a couple clear examples of things. It's like, it doesn't matter what we could all vote. Objective facts are not a matter of democracy. What's the phrase they always use on the media? Threat to our democracy. Facts are a threat to democracy. That's a great line. We should make t-shirts. Facts. Sorry, news people. Journos. Facts are a threat to democracy. Why? Because they don't care about it. But facts don't become true because you vote. Tree doesn't become or a song out there because we all vote on it. Bling, then it pops out. Like, oh, isn't democracy awesome? We vote things into existence. Mathematical truths, suns, trees. Nope, not this time. Well, what about? I'm giving you clear examples I think you would all agree with, right? What's more difficult? And the question of meta-ethics, are there moral facts? Just because facts in general are objective. Again, you gave an example of art, food, taste, color preference. That you can make a factual statement. He loves the taste of peanut butter, right? That's a fact that's pointing to the subject right there. And it's not an objective fact. Doesn't apply to all people at all times, where everybody has a duty to think and believe that peanut butter is the best tasting food in the universe. But what about moral facts, moral statements? Are they all subjective? Can I actually say there are no moral objective facts? What do you guys think? Or are there some? There are some. That was that question. If you look in your textbook, if you have it. Are there certain types of actions should never be done in any circumstances? That sounds to me like an objective claim, doesn't it? Never for anybody in any circumstance whatsoever. Okay, so what do you guys think? Are ethical systems, are they all just subjective and relative? Or are there certain things that you would say, yeah, I think this would be always correct or always wrong for all people at all times?
I mean, even today, we talk about like abortions or like the death penalty doesn't apply, not everybody agrees.
Okay, what would you say? Now I'm gonna train you when somebody says something in class to say the opposite. Remember when you were a kid, the opposite land? No. We actually get to do this in class and learn. Why? Because it helps us think through all the issues. These are called counter arguments. It's how you test something. If I said, my car floats on water. Maybe you wouldn't want to test it. Really? Okay, go. But do you see what I mean? That's how we would hold a claim up. So let's. I would say there are no moral facts because people believe different things. How can we test them? Whether that's right or wrong, we gotta figure out, could it even be tested? That's right. We get our scientific calculator, Omatic 3000 and the Bunsen burner. Airmar flask and what else? I need some calcium carbonate. Does anybody have some calcium carbonate on? Is that how we're gonna test it? And if I did, be like, oh wow, it turns out that you're wrong. You probably wouldn't believe me. You'd be like, what did the teacher do? I don't know, he took some statement that I said, put it in the Airmar flask. Heated it up with water and baking soda, calcium carbonate, and I answered you now that I was wrong. If you told that to somebody outside of class, they'd be like, what the heck? Either that's totally insane, or be like, I gotta take this class, right? That's all you have to do is like every time, every single answer, if you follow this simple recipe. You get Airmar flask out, right? Some water. Some baking soda, you heat that up. You're gonna get the right answer. How do you think I'm so successful in my Bitcoin investments? I do the same, it starts to sound like sorcery or something. Alright, that's not the, I'm just being funny just to show you, like, obviously that's not the way that we're gonna test it. How can we possibly test that claim? Let's see if it's true or false. There can't be any moral facts because people believe different things about any particular moral issue. Did I get that correct, that I represent? Alright, now it's up to you. Or I gotta test that. Is that true? How do I test it? Well, I'll go to a clear example, is one. Does disagreement make something relative? I don't know. I'll have to test that. Does mere disagreement or the fact that people could believe something different about a question mean that there's no objective answer? Okay, let me go to a clear example. What if everybody believed a different answer about that? Would that mean, this is the way I would test it. I go to something very clear, or much clearer, mathematics, and be like, okay. I've got 10 people that all give me a different answer. So I've got an example of people that believe different things. What would you conclude? First thing. About, do you see how we go to the mathematics is clear? Now, if I can suss this out and fix this, then I can go to maybe a more complicated example like you have. Everybody gives me a different answer to the math problem. Should I conclude there is no objective answer? Why? Because if something's objective, it doesn't, the truth of it doesn't depend on what somebody says. Let me give you another example. There is a tree outside. Now, you can believe that, or you might not. But that's objectively true. If there actually is. So how do I say that that's actually objectively true? Is it because I believe it? Or if in reality there's actually a tree outside? Independent of my belief? What would you guys say to that? The statement, there is a tree outside, is objectively true. Because I either believe it and only because I believe it. Or because there's actually a tree outside independent of whether I believe it. What would you guys say? Yes. Same with this. It doesn't matter how many people give different answers. Or believe that this is false, this would be true. If that's the reality of the situation. Okay, does everybody follow me so far? So now I have a principle, just now it might be the case. That it does, in certain circumstances. Different beliefs about something, like peanut butter, means it's subjective. My question is always? Yes.
Would there be a difference between like a tangible fact and like?
Yeah, that's why. Well, that's a good question. Tangible means you need a person that can touch it. So the tree doesn't become exist just because there's people who can touch it. It exists outside and independent of you, and you can touch. Do you see how it's reversed? But maybe a better example is that ain't tangible. I can't test that by touching. These are what we call abstract entities in mathematics, so that's why I use that one. So I've derived a principle that I can test. Not in every situation, because people disagree or have different beliefs, means that it's subjective. I gave 2 examples. So I can't say simply, I need more than that. I can't simply say because people believe different moral things that there's no answer, objective answer on. What do I know? I just know, what did I make, the description? Versus prescription. Distinction. I can describe that people, it is true that people have different moral conclusions and beliefs about stuff. It's different than, yeah, but what ought they to believe? What should they believe? So I think we're confusing the 2 categories simply because people, I'm describing different people have different answers. Or believe different things. Doesn't mean there isn't an objective answer. That's first things first. So there's a way to, and we'll get into the further arguments in what's called moral relativism later in the semester. More detailed arguments, but we already have some indications that that's probably not true. That I would need more than just people believe different things to actually make that argument if I was a moral relativist. That there are no moral objective truths, I need more than that. Does that sound agreeable so far? Let's look about, is there any? Another way to work through this too and test is, do I actually believe that? So sometimes we often say stuff that requires a little bit of introspection. How many people have had that experience? I've said something that I believe, and it's not until like further reflection, like I actually don't believe that. I didn't think about. Something just, it happens all the time with my wife and I. She helps me, she's like, you don't believe. And I'm like, you're right, I don't. It takes a little thinking, I'm like, I don't know why I said that. Anybody else have that experience? That's what's great about philosophy, we can introspect. Do we actually really believe that? There are no moral objective truth. There's nothing that's wrong for all people at all times. Can I find an example where I personally would think this would be wrong at all times for all people, regardless of what they think? Can you, that's called a counterexample. Can you think of that? Or is it just relative to, well, it's right for this group, they think it's right. I'll give you a perfect example. Genocide. I just love me some genocide. In the morning. Carroll College Students Association has in clubs has started the Genocide Club. They'll be out taking signups and well, we all just decided genocide was a real good way to go, and I know you don't agree with that, but that's why you're the first one on our list that will be eliminated. You see, how do I win the argument? I just eliminate all the opponents, right? Now, would you be like, well, I guess that is right for me, right? Guess we gotta be more inclusive and, well. I feel like I'm channeling Norm Macdonald. Well, I just went outside and saw the genocide student group and I disagreed with them and well, once you know, I was the first one up on the list there to be eliminated, and turns out they said they win every single argument. Doesn't it sound like a comedy routine? They said they were undefeated in arguments because there was nobody to challenge them. Would you be like, yeah, I think that's objectively wrong. I don't care what this student group out here thinks. That's just something I'm not gonna tolerate. Any votes for that? Holy smokes! I gotta turn this camera around and use this as blackmail against you guys. Be like, yeah, they voted for genocide. What can I say? I tried to make it, President said, I really did. I tried to make the argument that genocide was objectively wrong and the students just weren't going for it. Who are these new recruiters that you have working for Carroll? This is amazing. I'm gonna vote for, yeah, I think genocide is objective. Anybody else? Okay. Any other one? Peanut butter is objective, yes. That one won't throw on that. Any other examples, things that I think are objectively wrong? Torturing innocent people for no good reason. Because you're a masochist, right? You just enjoy it. Jeffrey Dahmerism. Eating people because you're hungry. Actually, that would be a better argument. I don't think he was hungry. Because we've heard the case of Donner, right? The Donner Party. And I think we might make like, hey, they're gonna die. By the way, this is terrible. I used to make this joke when I was a kid. So we'd go to a restaurant with my family, right? And you put your name in. Well, it's gonna be 15 minutes. What's her name? Sorn Party of like 4 or whatever. So when they start calling the kid like the names of family, I'm like, Donner Party of 5, your family's ready. Your family. My parents are like, shut up. I'm so funny. People are like, nobody else thinks it's funny. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's objectively true. I don't need having people's laughs to know that it's objectively funny. You can be a philosopher one day, aren't you? The bane of our family's existence. Well, we were so proud of our other son, and the other one went wayward and became a philosopher. That's like all my parents be like. Mom says, you just said that because you want to justify your behavior. I'm like, yeah, that's why I went into philosophy. Justify my beliefs and behaviors. Okay, enough jokes, let's get serious. So not Donner. And the family, Jeffrey Dahmer's. Donner? That's crazy, I didn't think about that. Jeffrey Dahmer. Is eating people not because he's gonna starve. But there's something objectively going wrong. Right, what did you say? Which would be like objectively, I can't get on board with that. I don't care if everybody voted tomorrow. Jeffrey Dahmer was right. It was beautiful. He was an artist. You see. He'd be better artist, like. You're gonna be like, nope, I don't care what any of you think, you're all wrong. Wouldn't you say that? So I've given you 3 examples. I think that if we introspect, be like, who it's all relative. I can't deal with the consequences. I just don't believe that. All right. That's one way to think about it. Fun and serious. By the way, that's how I love doing the litmus test. This, by the way, this came up the other day. And I always have a Jeffrey Dahmer litmus, like, does it hold up to the Jeffrey Dahmer test? It's basically a one good way that I like to use just to figure out if something's true or false. So about a month ago, a guy at the brewery. I made a comment that I thought everybody could be on board with. Give me your money, no, give me all your money. I say that time seems to be precious, doesn't it? Can we all agree with that? The other statement I could agree on too is gonna be really hot in there. As you get older, you feel that it's more precious because you have less of it. And you want to do stuff. So time is a precious commodity. He's like, I don't think so. I'm like, are you suicidal or something? Are you gonna are you gonna blow your brains out? Like, who makes statements like that? But a suicide, I hate time. Like, so I just don't think he thought before he said something, and we all met those people that. It's called verbal diarrhea. It's just like, there's no filter, they just say stuff and they don't even think about it for 2 seconds. Well, I think he kind of dialed it back and he was like, well, look. I just think the meaning of life is do whatever makes you feel happy. Heard that phrase. But you have to understand, he's speaking to a philosopher. That's constantly analyzing everything and testing people's statements. So what do you think I do? I send it right into the Jeffrey Dahmer test machine. And I'm like, does that hold up for what? Would he or me or anybody be willing to be like, Jeffrey, you know, the most important thing in life is you just do whatever makes you feel happy. We've also heard that you be you. You do you. How many people heard that? Now, as a philosopher, I'm like, that sounds like an absurd statement to me. Why? Because I use the Jeffrey Dahmer test. The Jeffrey Dahmer philosophical analysis test kit is available for purchase at the door on the way out, and you too can test, is this something I should believe? Jeffrey Dahmer's mother says to him, Jeffrey, you just do you. He's like, oh. I'm not down with that. So I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That's crazy talk. Nobody should be promoting that type of ethical system. That was my thoughts. Now, I didn't say that to him because it probably would have made him feel dumb, and there's 1 or 2 ways this conversation could have went if I actually didn't just have it in my head and I said it out loud. He would have felt shame and embarrassed for saying something so stupid, and he would have doubled down. I've seen that happen a million times. Or he just got mad and yelled at me or said, I've seen that. More rare case, you'd been like, yeah, that is That is kind of silly, huh? I don't wanna recommend, that's really rare. And typically. I only get that after I've developed a relationship with somebody. There's a sort of kind of personal investment that you just don't wanna be like, hey, you know. Beep you, blah, blah, blah. It's like we don't say that to people who typically we do, but not. That we, but do you see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of times that. Even if somebody's wrong, you may not call them out, right, or say something. Does that make sense? So that's kind of discussion. Any questions about that so far? Where are we on time? Are we out of here? One of the things we addressed was moral skepticism. We'll talk about that in chapters 19, 20, 21. But that would be, what's skepticism? There's no way, I don't believe that, like, there's no answer to. These kinds of questions about Jeffrey Dahmer, like that's. And there's philosophers that have articulated. That kind of stuff. Well, one question that arises is, oh, if there's no answer. What if you went to, give me another class that you're taking, an example. Nobody's taking classes, is the only class I'm honored, thank you. Another class,
Native American Studies.
Native American Studies, give me another one.
Anatomy and physiology.
Anatomy and physiology, another one.
Math.
Math, okay, let me pick one of those. What if it was anatomy or physiology? Well, let's take the math one. You go and a professor says. There's no answers to anything that we're actually gonna be doing in this entire class. What would you probably do? Then I don't need to be here, right? Wouldn't you rather be sleeping in? It's an early class. Professor says there's no answers. So, well, that worries me about moral skepticism. There's no answers to ethics. Is it worth studying? So that's why we have here, well, maybe there's still reasons why. We'll put that on the back burner. What do you think about this? We already listed some of these. Remember the no-goes? Jeffrey Dahmerisms? These are often in any discipline of what's called the starting points. And I want you to think, maybe I have some starting points. I begin all of my reasoning from these. And if you have some ethical starting points, maybe some of these you share in common. Deliberately hurting other people requires justification. Can't do that for no reason. You better have a good reason. I might agree with that. I think that'd be an ethical starting point for me. Equals ought to be treated like equal. Might doesn't make right. That was the example of the Genocide Student Club. They were right because they eliminated all their competition. There was nobody to. I made this joke the other day about being undefeated in debate. I'm like, why? Because I blackmail. I'm like, that's a great argument. I'm calling your mom. Oh, I won. Undefeated, right? What is that? Might. Does that make me right? No. Maybe that's an ethical starting point for you. Free and informed requests prevent rights violations. Those are some examples. So I want you to think about what are kind of ethical starting points I might have. And we'll finish up on this. Can you do me a favor, because we don't, somebody get on one and only one piece of paper out. The new Moodle does not have your names listed by number, which made it a lot easier for giving participation points. But get a piece of paper out, if you did participate, ask a question, said something, and participate doesn't mean I sat and existed in a desk. And listened, but you contributed through a question or something, write your name on there and I'll add that in, and I will see you guys Thursday, I'll put up the assignment for Thursday too. Thanks, guys.
But it's not.